The storm hadn't started yet, but the sky had turned a bruised kind of blue, the kind that made the walls of Daniel's apartment feel closer than they should. He moved like someone used to silence, pouring tea for one, lighting candles instead of turning on the lights. He wasn't lonely, not exactly. He'd made peace with solitude. Or so he told himself. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud. 3 slow taps. Familiar in a way that made his spine straighten. He didn't move at first, just stared at the door as if it might vanish if ignored. But the second knock came, softer this time, almost hesitant. He opened it without thinking. Reflex, not reason. And there stood Eli. Hair slightly longer, jaw sharper, eyes the same ocean gray that once unraveled Daniel completely. The years had changed him in shape, but not in presence. Eli still carried the storm in his eyes, the kind that promised either love or devastation, never anything in between. Daniel's mouth parted, but nothing came out. "Hi," Eli said, voice quieter than the rain beginning to tap against the window panes. Daniel blinked. "Eli?" "I was nearby," Eli offered. "I didn't think you'd answer." "I shouldn't have," Daniel replied, but still, he stepped aside. Eli entered like he used to, without waiting for permission, without apology. His coat dripped faint trails of water on the hardwood, but Daniel didn't care. He was still trying to understand how memory had become flesh again. "Nice place," Eli murmured, glancing around. "Different." "People change," Daniel said, not bothering to hide the bite in his tone. Eli smiled faintly. "Do they?" The room felt heavy with words unsaid. Daniel watched as Eli walked slowly to the old record player in the corner. He didn't touch it, just stared at it. "You kept it," Eli whispered. "I tried to throw it out once," Daniel admitted. "But it still worked. Just wouldn't stop playing our song." Eli looked at him then, really looked, like he was trying to measure how much had survived the time, the silence, the hurt. Daniel hated how easily it disarmed him. "I didn't come to stir things up," Eli said finally. I didn't know where else to go." Daniel laughed, sharp and humorless. "Is that supposed to comfort me?" "No," Eli replied, "just the truth." Silence again, but not like before. This one had edges. Daniel folded his arms. "So what do you want, Eli?" The question hung in the air like breath on a cold mirror. "I don't know," Eli admitted. "Maybe just to sit for a while. Maybe to feel like I'm not drowning." Daniel stared at him, searching for a crack in his voice, a sign of manipulation. But all he saw was the boy he'd once loved, cloaked in the man who'd left without goodbye. He stepped aside and pointed to the couch. "Sit, but don't expect anything more." As Eli moved toward the couch, Daniel stayed by the door. Something, deep inside, whispered, "You've opened this door before, and it nearly broke you." But still, he didn't close it. Not yet. Eli sat on the couch like it still remembered him, like it had molded itself to the weight of his absence. Daniel remained standing, arms crossed, body angled away, but eyes locked in place. The distance between them was less about feet and more about years. "Tea?" Daniel asked, voice clipped. Eli nodded. "If you're offering." He wasn't, but he poured a second cup anyway. The clink of porcelain softened the tension. Familiar rituals filled the space where their words failed. When Daniel handed him the cup, their fingers brushed, a flash of warmth that stole the breath right out of his lungs. Eli didn't pull away. "Still use too much honey," Eli murmured after a sip. Daniel allowed the corner of his mouth to twitch. "Still think you know better." A brief laugh broke through, light and surprising. For a moment, the air cleared, like a window opened in a smoke-filled room. Daniel sat across from him, elbows resting on his knees, eyes never straying. "What happened to you?" he asked finally. "You disappeared. No calls, no explanations. Just gone." Eli looked down at his tea, swirled it, swallowed hard. "I was drowning," he said, "and I thought if I pulled you in, we'd both sink." Daniel stared. "You already pulled me in, Eli. You just let go when I needed you to hold on." The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. Eli opened his mouth, then closed it. Instead, he looked around the room again. It was sparse, clean, lived in but not lived with. "You stopped painting," he said softly. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You stopped being my muse." That landed, between them like broken glass, sharp, hard to look at. Eli leaned back and exhaled. "I missed this. You. I missed the way you could cut me with honesty and still make it sound like poetry." "You always liked being wounded," Daniel replied. Eli didn't argue. Eventually, the conversation drifted toward safer shores. Old memories, shared road trips, that rainy night in Venice when Eli kissed Daniel in the middle of a flooded alley, shoes soaked, hearts bursting. They laughed about it now, but it still stung. Time ticked by. The storm outside intensified, wind rattling the windows. Inside, warmth returned in cautious doses. Eli's shoulders relaxed. Daniel's expression softened. They sat closer without realizing. "I never stopped loving you," Eli whispered, voice barely audible above the rain. Daniel looked at him. Really looked. There it was again, the softness that had once convinced him forever was real. He felt it rising in him, that dangerous ache, the kind that wants to believe in second chances. He didn't respond, but he didn't move away either. And when Eli reached out, resting his hand gently on Daniel's, Daniel let it stay. Just for a moment. Just long enough to forget why he should have pulled away. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the air inside Daniel's apartment felt heavier than before, thick with things left unsaid. Eli was still asleep on the couch, blanket pulled up to his chin, the kind of peace on his face that made Daniel question everything. He stood by the window, sipping lukewarm tea, pretending he wasn't watching him. His eyes eventually drifted to the coffee table. Eli's phone buzzed once, screen lighting up with a message. "You said you'd have the money by this week? Don't make me chase you again." Daniel froze. He didn't want to look again, but he did. There were more texts, mentions of overdue rent, a missed payment on a car, a promise to figure something out. Daniel's chest tightened each, breath slower, more deliberate. He walked quietly to the kitchen, pretending not to care. But his mind had already begun assembling the puzzle. Late-night arrival, sudden reappearance, the desperation masked as nostalgia. It wasn't love Eli came back for. It was shelter. When Eli stirred awake, Daniel was waiting. "You didn't tell me things were bad," Daniel said flatly. Eli blinked, still half asleep. "What do you mean?" Daniel tossed the phone gently onto the couch. "You should clear your notifications if you're going to lie." Eli sat up slowly, eyes darting to the screen. Guilt bloomed across his face. "I wasn't lying," he said carefully. "I just didn't think it mattered." Daniel's jaw clenched. "It matters when you walk back into my life, pretending it's about love when it's really about a roof over your head." Eli looked away, fingers twisting in the blanket. "I didn't plan this. I swear. I was just drowning. I didn't know where else to go." Daniel stepped back, shaking his head. "You didn't come to find me, Eli. You came to use me." "That's not fair." "No," Daniel snapped. You vanished when things got hard, left me with no closure, no goodbye, and now you show up broken, and expect me to carry you through another storm? Eli's voice cracked. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, Daniel said, quieter now. Twice. The silence this time wasn't warm. It was the kind that settles in after the truth has been spoken. Cold. Final. Eli stood slowly. I didn't expect a second chance. I just hoped there might be one. Daniel met his eyes. There was no anger there anymore, only the ache of recognition. He saw Eli clearly now. Not as the boy he once loved, but as the man he'd outgrown. I let you in because I wanted to believe. People change, Daniel said. But maybe I just wanted to believe you had. Eli took a breath to respond, but the moment had passed. Daniel turned away. The morning light broke through the window, bright, unforgiving. Eli stood near the door, his coat half on, gaze fixed somewhere beneath his feet. The silence between him and Daniel had shifted, no longer tense, just hollow. Like a house stripped of furniture, the echo of something once lived in. Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, eyes tired. He wasn't angry anymore. Disappointment had taken its place, quieter but far more permanent. I didn't come here to manipulate you, Eli said finally, voice barely above a whisper. I just didn't know where else to go. Daniel nodded slowly. And I believe that. But that's the problem, Eli. You didn't come back because of me. You came back because of need. There's a difference. Eli opened his mouth, searching for something. An apology, a justification, anything that might fix what had already splintered. But there was no phrase left in the English language strong enough to rewrite the truth. I thought maybe, Eli said, stepping closer. If I could just be near you again, I'd remember who I was before I ruined everything. Daniel's face softened, but his posture didn't. You don't get to find yourself in me. Not anymore. A pause hung between them, long enough to make time feel weightless. Will you be okay? Eli asked. I already am, Daniel said. That answer settled like dust in sunlight. Quiet, absolute. Eli looked around once more, memorizing the space. He lingered by the record player, fingertips grazing its edge like a final goodbye. Then, with the weight of regret stitched into every step, he walked to the door. Daniel followed, not to stop him, but to close it when he left. As Eli turned the handle, he glanced back one last time. You were the only home I ever had, you know. Daniel's reply was soft but certain. Then you should have never left. The door opened with a creak. The hallway outside was bathed in gray light, empty and cold. Eli stepped out without another word. Daniel closed the door gently, pressing his palm to the wood for a breath longer than necessary. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He simply existed in the stillness, letting it settle. Later, he lit a candle, one of the ones Eli used to mock for being too fragrant. He returned to the couch, alone now, and let the silence wrap around him, not as a punishment, but as peace. He picked up a book, then changed his mind. Instead, he stood and walked to the window. Rain had started again, soft and steady. Some doors weren't meant to stay open, not because of what they let in, but because of what they take when they leave. Daniel closed his eyes. He had let Eli in, only to remember too late why he never should have.